The arena lights dimmed to near darkness, and then suddenly a familiar roar erupted through the speakers that sent every single person in attendance jumping from their seats because Brock Lesnar was back and nobody saw it coming. The Beast Incarnate had been absent from WWE programming for months and speculation ran wild about whether we would ever see him again, but on this particular Monday Night Raw all doubts were erased in the most violent fashion imaginable. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, make sure you do it right now because you don't want to miss a single moment of the chaos that unfolded when these two powerhouses collided in what became one of the most shocking moments in recent WWE history. The crowd was already electric from the opening match when the production suddenly cut to black and that iconic music hit the PA system like a freight train barreling through a brick wall. Fans who had been sitting down shot up to their feet while others screamed themselves hoarse because they knew exactly what was about to happen. The Beast Incarnate emerged from behind the curtain with Paul Heyman trailing behind him looking as confident and smug as ever. Brock moved with that same predatory grace that has terrified opponents for over 2 decades, and his eyes scanned the arena with an intensity that could cut through steel. He wasn't there to talk, and he certainly wasn't there to play games because Brock Lesnar had one objective on his mind, and that was complete and utter destruction. Meanwhile, Braun Breaker had been on an absolute tear through the Raw roster, demolishing everyone who stepped into his path and establishing himself as the future of WWE. The second-generation superstar carried the legacy of the Steiner family on his broad shoulders, and week after week he proved why he deserved to be mentioned among the elite. His combination of raw power and surprising agility made him a nightmare matchup for anyone, and his confidence had grown to the point where he truly believed nobody could stop his momentum. He had just finished a backstage segment where he was cutting a promo about his dominance when production personnel started frantically pointing toward the stage area. Braun turned his attention to a nearby monitor, and his expression shifted from confusion to shock to pure adrenaline as he realized what was happening. Brock made his way down the ramp with methodical precision, and each step he took seemed to shake the foundation of the building itself. Paul Heyman held the microphone, but before he could even begin his usual eloquent introduction, Braun Breaker's music hit and the young powerhouse came charging out from the back. The crowd lost their collective minds because this was the collision everyone wanted to see but nobody expected to happen so soon. 2 generations of pure athletic dominance were about to meet head-on, and the anticipation in that arena reached levels that few events ever achieve. Braun stood at the top of the ramp staring down at Brock, who had stopped halfway down and turned to face the interruption with a smirk that said he welcomed the challenge. The stare down lasted only seconds before Braun sprinted down the ramp at full speed and Brock dropped into a combat stance ready to meet him head-on. When they collided, it was like watching 2 bulls crashing into each other with neither man giving an inch initially. Braun threw a massive clothesline that Brock ducked under before grabbing him and attempting an immediate F5, but Breaker twisted his body and landed on his feet behind Lesnar. The speed and strength on display from both men was absolutely breathtaking, and the audience could barely process what they were witnessing. Braun bounced off the ropes and came back with a spear attempt, but Brock sidestepped and caught him with a knee to the midsection that doubled the younger star over. Security personnel came flooding out from backstage along with several referees who were desperately trying to separate the 2 behemoths, but they might as well have been trying to stop a tsunami with their bare hands. Brock shoved away 3 security guards like they were children while Braun tossed 2 referees aside without even looking at them. The chaos escalated when Brock grabbed one of the security team and hit him with an F5 on the entrance ramp just to make a statement. Braun responded by grabbing another security guard and launching him over the barricade into the timekeeper's area with a fallaway slam that had everyone gasping. These two weren't just fighting each other anymore, they were destroying everything and everyone in their path. Raw General Manager Adam Pearce came rushing out onto the stage with a microphone in hand, screaming for both men to stop, but his words fell on deaf ears. Brock turned his attention toward Pearce for just a moment, and that split-second distraction was all Braun needed to charge in with another spear attempt. This time he connected and drove Brock back first into the LED board on the side of the ramp, causing sparks to fly and the screen to flicker. The impact was devastating, but Brock immediately popped back up to his feet like the collision had only made him angrier. He grabbed Braun by the throat and lifted him for a chokeslam, but Breaker broke the grip and delivered a series of rapid-fire shoulder tackles that actually forced Lesnar backward step by step. The fight spilled into the ringside area where Brock grabbed the steel steps and hurled them at Braun, who barely managed to dodge out of the way. The steps crashed into the barricade with such force that several fans in the front row jumped back in shock. Braun retaliated by grabbing a steel chair and swinging it at Brock's head, but Lesnar caught the chair mid-swing and ripped it out of Breaker's hands before tossing it into the crowd. The display of strength from both competitors was beyond anything most people had ever witnessed live, and social media immediately exploded with clips and reactions from fans around the world. Wrestling journalists were frantically typing out breaking news alerts while fans in attendance recorded every second on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something truly special. More officials and security teams arrived, but they had learned their lesson and kept their distance, forming a perimeter instead of trying to physically intervene. Brock and Braun continued their battle around ringside, with neither man showing any signs of fatigue despite the intense physicality of their encounter. Brock whipped Braun into the ring post, but Breaker reversed it at the last second, sending Lesnar crashing into the steel instead. The sound of flesh meeting metal echoed throughout the arena, and for the first time since his return, Brock actually looked stunned. Braun seized the opportunity and charged forward with a running powerslam that drove Brock through the announce table and an explosion of monitors, cables and shattered wood. The commentary team of Michael Cole and Corey Graves had scattered the moment they saw the two men heading their direction, and they watched from a safe distance as their workplace became a casualty of this war. Cole was screaming into his headset microphone about how he had never seen anything like this in all his years with WWE, while Graves kept repeating that someone needed to stop this before someone got seriously hurt. But the truth was that nobody could stop it, because when you have two alpha predators this powerful and this determined, there is no force on earth that can separate them until they decide they're finished. Brock emerged from the wreckage of the announce table with his forehead split open and blood beginning to trickle down his face. The sight of his own blood seemed to flip a switch inside the beast incarnate, because his eyes went wide and a twisted smile crossed his face. He grabbed Braun by the head and delivered a series of brutal knees to the face before lifting him up for an F5, and this time there was no escape. Brock spun around with Breaker on his shoulders and drove him down onto the pile of broken table debris with such impact that the entire ringside area seemed to shake. But instead of walking away, Brock immediately pulled Braun back up and hit him with a second F5, this time on the exposed concrete floor outside the ring. Medical personnel rushed to check on Braun Breaker as Brock stood over him, breathing heavily but still looking ready for more violence. Paul Heyman finally caught up to his client and was frantically trying to convince him that the message had been sent and it was time to leave. Brock shoved Heyman away and reached down to grab Braun again, but this time Adam Pearce stepped between them, putting his own safety at risk to prevent further carnage. Pearce looked up at Brock and said something that the cameras couldn't pick up, but whatever words were exchanged seemed to get through, because Lesnar finally took a step back. He pointed down at the fallen Braun Breaker and said something that was caught on camera, which was simply, "You're not ready, kid." The raw emotion and intensity of that moment was unlike anything fans had seen in years, and it immediately became clear that this wasn't just a random attack or a publicity stunt. This was Brock Lesnar making a statement that he was still the most dominant force in all of professional wrestling, and anyone who thought otherwise was about to learn a very painful lesson. Braun Breaker had been built up as an unstoppable monster who was destined to be the next big thing in WWE, but in a matter of minutes the beast incarnate had reminded everyone that there are levels to this business, and Brock operates on a plane that very few have ever reached. As medical staff helped Braun to his feet and began assessing his injuries, the camera caught a glimpse of his face, and despite the beating he had just endured, there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was anger and determination, because Braun Breaker wasn't the type to back down from anyone regardless of their reputation or accomplishments. He shoved away the medical personnel and tried to charge after Brock again, but his legs gave out and he collapsed back to the floor. The officials immediately swarmed him, preventing any further confrontation, while Brock and Paul Heyman made their way up the ramp to a thunderous reaction from the crowd that was somehow both cheers and boos mixed together in a deafening roar. The backstage area was in complete chaos as WWE producers and executives tried to figure out what had just happened and what it meant for future programming. Nobody had known Brock was going to be there that night, which meant this was either a very well-kept secret or a last-minute decision that caught everyone off guard. Speculation immediately began about whether this was going to lead to a match between Lesnar and Breaker, and if so, when and where would it take place. The obvious answer was WrestleMania, but that was still months away, and there was no way WWE could keep these two separated for that long given the intensity of what had just transpired. Social media platforms were completely overwhelmed with reactions to the segment as wrestling fans from around the globe weighed in on what they had just witnessed. Some praised WWE for delivering an unpredictable and hard-hitting moment that felt genuinely shocking in an era where most fans can predict storylines weeks in advance. Others expressed concern about whether Braun Breaker would be permanently damaged by taking such a decisive loss so early in his main roster run. Wrestling analysts and former superstars chimed in with their takes, arguing about whether this was brilliant booking or a mistake that could derail Breaker's momentum. The debate raged on through the night and into the following days as everyone tried to make sense of the Beast's explosive return. Meanwhile, Braun Breaker refused medical treatment backstage and instead demanded a meeting with Adam Pearce to discuss his response to what Brock had done. Reports from people who were in the room said that Breaker was absolutely livid and wanted an immediate rematch with Lesnar regardless of the circumstances or consequences. Pearce tried to calm him down and explain that these things take time to plan and promote, but Braun wasn't hearing any of it. He made it clear that he didn't care about promotion or build-up or any of the traditional wrestling business aspects, because all he cared about was getting his hands on Brock Lesnar and proving that he wasn't some young punk who could be pushed around. The following week on Raw, the show opened with Adam Pearce standing in the ring with a microphone ready to address the situation that had dominated all wrestling media coverage for the past 7 days. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation, wondering if they were about to get another surprise appearance from Brock Lesnar or if Braun Breaker would come out seeking revenge. Pearce began by acknowledging that what happened the previous week was unprecedented and unacceptable from a safety standpoint, but also undeniably compelling from an entertainment perspective. He explained that he had been in contact with both Brock Lesnar and Braun Breaker throughout the week and that both men had made their intentions crystal clear. Before Pearce could continue, Braun Breaker's music hit and the young superstar came storming out to the ring looking even more intense than usual. His body language suggested barely controlled rage as he grabbed a microphone and told Pearce to stop with the corporate talk and just give him what he wanted. Breaker cut a passionate promo about how he had worked his entire life to get to WWE and establish himself as a dominant force only to have some part-timer show up and try to embarrass him in front of the world. He said that he respected Brock's legacy and accomplishments, but respect didn't mean he was going to roll over and accept being disrespected. Braun demanded that Pierce make the match official and give him the opportunity to prove that the future of WWE was stronger than its past. The crowd was firmly behind Braun during this promo because everyone loves an underdog story, and despite his size and strength, Breaker was definitely positioned as the underdog in this scenario. Pierce seemed genuinely conflicted because on one hand he understood Braun's desire for revenge, but on the other hand he had a responsibility to protect the wrestlers under his purview from unnecessary harm. He was about to respond when Paul Heyman's voice came over the speaker system interrupting the proceedings. Heyman appeared on the giant screen from an undisclosed location and delivered one of his trademark verbose promos about how Brock Lesnar doesn't answer to challenges from children who haven't earned the right to share a ring with him. Heyman explained that Brock Lesnar is a special attraction who appears when he wants to appear and fights who he wants to fight, and some upstart second-generation superstar wasn't going to dictate terms to the Beast incarnate. This only infuriated Braun more, and he started screaming at the screen, calling Heyman a coward and demanding that he bring Brock out right now to finish what they started. Heyman just smiled that condescending smile he's perfected over decades and said that if Braun Breaker really wanted to prove himself worthy of sharing a ring with Brock Lesnar, then he needed to earn that privilege. He announced that over the coming weeks Braun would have to face a series of opponents chosen by Brock himself, and if he could defeat all of them, then maybe, just maybe, he would get his match. This stipulation added an interesting wrinkle to the storyline because it gave WWE the ability to stretch out the build to the eventual match while also giving Braun opportunities to look strong in victory. The list of opponents that Brock chose was essentially a who's who of Raw's toughest competitors, including several former world champions and established main event stars. Each week Braun would face another challenge, and each week he would overcome it in increasingly impressive fashion. The victories started to pile up, and with each win Braun's confidence grew while the anticipation for his eventual showdown with Brock reached fever pitch levels. During this time Brock would make sporadic appearances either in person or via satellite to comment on Braun's progress, and it became clear that the Beast was actually impressed with what he was seeing, even if he would never openly admit it. There were subtle hints that Brock saw something of himself in the young Breaker, and that this entire gauntlet was less about humiliation and more about testing whether Braun had what it took to truly operate at the highest level. The psychology of the storyline was brilliant because it gave depth to what could have been a simple monster versus monster feud and instead turned it into a story about legacy, respect, and proving oneself worthy. As the weeks went by and Braun continued to demolish every opponent put in front of him, the WWE Universe became more and more invested in seeing him finally get his hands on Brock Lesnar. The anticipation built to the point where WWE had no choice but to make the match official for their next premium live event. The announcement came during a face-to-face confrontation between Brock and Braun where both men stood in the ring just staring each other down without saying a word. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and when they finally came to blows, security and officials were once again powerless to stop them. It took what seemed like the entire locker room emptying out to finally separate the two warriors, and by that point the entire arena was on their feet screaming for the match to happen immediately. The build continued with both men engaging in a war of words and occasional physical altercations that kept the feud white-hot heading into the big event. Brock cut promos about how he was going to teach Braun the same lesson he had taught countless others over the years, which was that talent and potential mean nothing without the experience and killer instinct that can only be earned through years of battles. Braun fired back by pointing out that every legend eventually gets replaced by someone younger, faster, and hungrier, and that Brock's time at the top of the mountain was coming to an end whether he wanted to accept it or not. The verbal sparring was just as entertaining as the physical confrontations, and it became clear that both men were completely invested in making this feud as impactful as possible. When the night of the premium live event finally arrived, the atmosphere in the arena was electric with anticipation unlike anything WWE had seen in quite some time. The match was given a prominent spot on the card, and both men's entrances were treated like the huge deal they were. Brock came out first with Paul Heyman leading the way, and the reaction he received was that unique mix of respect and hostility that only someone of his stature can generate. When Braun's music hit and he made his entrance, the crowd exploded because they knew they were about to witness something special. The look in Breaker's eyes showed no fear, only determination and focus as he climbed into the ring and came face to face with the Beast one more time. The referee called for the bell and both men immediately charged at each other, meeting in the center of the ring with a collision that echoed throughout the building. What followed was an absolute war that showcased the incredible athleticism, power, and toughness of both competitors. They traded German suplexes like they were nothing, with each man popping right back up after being dumped on their head. Braun hit Brock with his signature spear that had put away every other opponent, but Lesnar kicked out at one, shocking everyone in attendance. Brock hit Braun with an F5, but Breaker also kicked out at one, sending a message that he was not going to be easily defeated. The match went back and forth with multiple near falls and several moments where it genuinely seemed like either man could win at any second. The crowd was completely into every move, every reversal, every near fall, reacting with genuine emotion to the drama unfolding before them. At one point both men were down on the mat exhausted from the punishment they had inflicted on each other, and the referee began his count while the audience clapped and stomped, trying to will both competitors back to their feet. When they finally got up, they met in the middle again and started trading heavy strikes, with neither man willing to back down or show any weakness. The finish came when Braun went for another spear, but Brock leapfrogged over him and caught him on the rebound with a massive clothesline that turned Breakker inside out. Lesnar immediately pulled Braun up and hit him with another F5, but instead of going for the pin he pulled him up again, showing that mean streak that has made him so feared throughout his career. Brock hit a second F5 and this time he hooked the leg for the 3 count, securing the victory, but only after one of the hardest fought battles of his entire career. The crowd gave both men a standing ovation as Brock's music played and Paul Heyman rushed into the ring to celebrate with his client. But the story wasn't over, because as Brock was leaving the ring he stopped and looked back at Braun, who was slowly getting to his feet. The two men locked eyes, and in that moment there was a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Brock gave Braun a small nod of acknowledgement before continuing his exit up the ramp, while Breakker stood in the ring accepting his defeat but looking far from defeated. The commentators put over how even in loss Braun Breakker had proven he belonged at the main event level and that his time would come. The image of Breakker standing tall despite losing became an iconic moment that signaled his arrival as a true top-tier talent. In the weeks following the match both men went their separate ways, but the impact of their feud continued to resonate throughout WWE programming. Brock had proven once again that he was still the alpha predator at the top of the food chain, but he had also been pushed harder than he had been in years, showing that the new generation was indeed nipping at his heels. Braun meanwhile used the loss as motivation to work even harder, and his performances in subsequent matches showed a new level of intensity and focus. The experience of going to war with Brock Lesnar had elevated him in ways that no amount of wins over lesser competition could have achieved. The feud became one of those rare examples of booking that benefited everyone involved, with Brock maintaining his status as WWE's ultimate final boss while Braun established himself as a future world champion who had been tested by the very best and survived to fight another day. Wrestling fans and critics alike praised WWE for how they handled the storyline, from the shocking return to the eventual match, delivering a narrative that felt fresh and exciting despite using familiar tropes. It reminded everyone why professional wrestling at its best can be the most compelling form of entertainment when the right performers are given the platform to showcase their talents. Looking back on the entire saga, from Brock's explosive return through the gauntlet of matches and culminating in their clash at the premium live event, it's clear that this was one of those rare feuds that will be remembered for years to come. The chemistry between Lesnar and Breakker, both in terms of their physical abilities and their understanding of how to build drama, was undeniable. Every segment felt important and every match delivered on the hype that preceded it. The WWE Universe was taken on a roller coaster ride of emotions, and by the end they had witnessed the birth of a new main event star and been reminded why Brock Lesnar remains one of the most special performers in wrestling history. The legacy of this feud extends beyond just the two men involved, because it set a blueprint for how to introduce new stars to the main event scene by having them face off against established legends. Too often WWE has struggled with the transition from one generation to the next, but in this case they nailed it by giving Braun credible opposition that tested him to his limits without completely destroying his momentum with a lopsided loss. The fact that Breakker looked strong even in defeat was crucial to maintaining his status as a future world champion, and the crowd's reaction showed that they bought into him as a legitimate top guy going forward. As we reflect on everything that transpired from that initial attack on Raw to the classic encounter at the premium live event, it becomes clear that these are the moments that define careers and create lasting memories for fans. Brock Lesnar added another chapter to his legendary career by showing he could still go at the highest level and help elevate younger talent in the process. Braun Breakker announced his arrival as a main event player in the most definitive way possible by standing toe-to-toe with the Beast incarnate and earning his respect through combat. The WWE Universe benefited by getting to witness a feud that delivered on every level, from surprising moments to hard-hitting action to compelling storytelling that kept everyone invested from start to finish. So if you made it this far in the story and haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we'll continue to bring you the most in-depth coverage and analysis of all the biggest moments in WWE and professional wrestling. This was a once-in-a-generation type of feud that reminded us all why we love this business and why moments like Brock Lesnar's return and his subsequent war with Braun Breakker will be talked about for decades to come as examples of sports entertainment at its absolute finest.